Hey, Richard, how you doing? Can you hear me? I think you're still muted, Richard. You got to unmute your here. Let's try that. All right.
That should do it.
Yep. Try that. Now we can talk to each other. How you doing?
I'm still here.
That's all that counts. You got to, as my grandfather used to say, you got to be here to play.
We got to be here and play.
Yeah, that was his, his all-time, contribution, in my life. That's the one thing I kind of remember about him. So that was.
Where's he from? West Virginia?
Yeah. Well, no, he was from, I think, Ohio.
Oh,
Is where his family was. Or no, I'm sorry, Indiana. Yeah. Yeah, he had a bunch of family up around Indiana, and he was actually not my grandfather. He I didn't know that at the time, but he was my grandmother's second husband, and so but I grew up thinking of him as my grandfather.
it was grandfather in effect, the same as
Pardon?
your regular grandfather. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I never actually got to meet my genetically, connected grandfather. He was out of the picture by the time, that I came along. So. And so, yeah, I grew up, basically, with the impression that, Charles E. Barnes was my grandfather. And so, and I was never told differently until, oh, God, I guess I was in my 20s when I found that out, actually. So, yeah, and kind of surprised, actually. But there were a lot of things in my family that I didn't get told until I was really quite a bit older. My grandmother, talked about her mother, who was full-blood Cherokee, pretty frequently, actually. And then, of course, my mother, basically denied the fact that we had any Native American blood in us whatsoever, because she grew up in West Virginia, and growing up in West Virginia, if you were Native American, it was like being black or, any other kind of minority.
You were shunned.
You were. And, it didn't, I'm sure for her it was tough, because it didn't make her a popular girl, in school and stuff. And oddly enough, I mean, when she, as she grew up, I guess she got to be, well, I guess she was 16, and she met a young man, and he was probably like 23, and she ended up basically getting together with him, and eventually marrying him after the birth of my sister. And then, they were having their troubles, and magically I appeared. But come to find out, Raymond, who is my biological father, he's actually a full-blood Native American from Utah, from the Ute tribe. And so, this thing that she seemed to be wanting to run away from, kind of came full circle. So, yeah, that's kind of roundabout, one of the weird things about, my family story. So,
Everybody has weird things in their family going way back. You can believe that.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's funny, we're all kind of products of, we grow up, we're told stories about our families and things like that.
Some may be true.
And so, and a lot of times, yeah, there is some like little grain of truth back in there, but a lot of people, I mean, they don't think of it very much, but long before people started coming to this country, there were people traveling all over the world from all different parts of the world. So even if you think that your ancestry is Scandinavian, and maybe Viking or something like that, how you could have, some Asian or Middle Eastern or African blood, in your family back there somewhere. Because, people got around, they just did. So anyway, looks like we got more people coming on there. We got about 8 of us now. Good morning, everybody. How are we all doing?
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Yeah. Everybody enjoy the weekend?
It was all right.
It was
Yeah.
all right? Wait a minute. It was 70 degrees yesterday.
Although that was great. Yes. Beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, it was like a spring day almost,
Very true.
I mean,
It was.
yeah, it was beautiful out. And, we're in the middle of December, for God's sakes. It's like, how often does that happen, So, yeah. Anyhow, anybody do anything fun? No?
Kept breathing.
Breathing? Well, I don't think of that as, I guess it would be a lot more fun than not breathing. Yes, that's true. Yeah. Yeah, I don't really think of that as fun though. Anybody go anywhere? Or is
Yeah.
everybody-
I actually connected with some relatives and friends over phone and Skype for the holidays. So it was a very nice afternoon.
Okay, good. I guess my question to you would be, understanding the circumstances and everything where we are, how does that feel, to kind of connect with people, in different parts of the country, family members, things like that you don't get to see that often now?
It's really nice because I had one cousin that I communicated with yesterday that we just communicate over the holidays and once a year basically. And it was actually sort of fun to see each other this time. Usually it's just been over the phone. So,
Mhm.
so the virtual and the visual, it was heartwarming.
Yeah, I had a similar experience recently. What do they call that? I was talking to my daughter, and we did this video chat thing, and
FaceTime?
yeah, FaceTime. That's right. And I had never used FaceTime before. And, it's a lot like what we're doing right now, with Zoom. But it was really nice because it added, other than just a phone call,
Right.
it added a lot to it, because she could see me, I could see her, and, we could share things. And it's interesting how communications with people are changing. And, just having that extra element of the visual part along with being able to have a conversation with them is.
And particularly for friends and relatives who are not local, that are different states, different parts of the world. It's a new avenue that you never had before.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, she's in Kansas, so it's like not like we see each other every week or anything.
Right.
It was it was a nice touch, you know, to have that happen as well.
My family does a Zoom call once a month now, so we see relatives that are all over the United States.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maria's
That's-
family does that in Mexico. It's like every Sunday. They take about 2 hours, and it's like all the cousins and I mean the whole family, you know, gets on Zoom, you know, as a shared Zoom call, so that they can, you know, just catch up with each other. And you know, it's you know, again, you know, that kind of goes back to that thing of, you know, as terrible as this whole experience, you know, is, at the same time, you know, it's had its blessings in just
That's
getting
true.
people to change, you know, make some changes, try some new things, and you know, have some new experiences. So anyhow, so everybody doing all right, huh?
Kind of.
Kind of. Okay. Yeah.
What can you do? I do my Zoom meetings with my grandkids,
Mm-hmm.
and they are young. So, but my 10-year-old, he is like into programming and stuff like that. So, one week we are doing Zoom, the other week we are doing FaceTime, and then he he found Skype.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I
Yeah. Well, I
forgot when
think,
I used to live on Skype, but now it's like, oh God.
right. Yeah, I was about to say Skype is the old thing, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's, you know, I mean, from the user's standpoint, I don't know that there's a huge difference between the three of them. They all seem very similar now.
I don't know. He finds some differences, so let him do whatever he wants. He send me a link,
Mhm.
and I connect, whatever.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good. You know, and you know, if you want to know anything about a computer, you know, ask a 10 or a 12-year-old.
Right, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, they're amazing, you know.
I'm always telling you, you need to do a class to grandpa so he knows what to do, you know?
Uh-huh. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
I'm a techie guy. It's not that I'm not a techie guy, but this kid,
Right.
it's like beats me all the time.
mm-hmm. Well, it's a whole new world out there, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, these kids, they grow up with it, and to them it's like drinking water or breathing air.
Yeah.
It's part of their life. So they have a different, I guess, understanding of it than we do even, and you know, it can be frightening. So anyway, so let's get going. We've, you know, we're missing a few people, but maybe they'll show up a little bit later. I've got a film for you that I want you to watch, and you know, it's kind of the wrap up of this whole contemporary art thing, and this should be fun because it's a very recent video, and it's by one of my favorite you know, producers on YouTube, and it's about American art. So anyway, sit back. Hopefully you have a cup of coffee, maybe a piece of toast or something like that, and you know, you'll learn a lot because he covers a lot of ground in this, and and it kind of explains, you know, how we got here. So anyway, here we go. Full screen with this. All right, and away we go.
When you're growing up in a small town, when you're growing up in a small town, when you're growing up in a small town, you say, no one famous ever came from here.
You know, no territory in America has had as much bad press in recent times as the American small town. Think of all the pop songs that have been written about getting out of places like this, hitting the road and heading for somewhere different.
When you're growing up in a small town, dead skin bed.
When you're growing up in a small town, sang Lou Reed in his rousing musical tribute to Andy Warhol. You hate it, and you have to leave.
Small town. You hate it. No, you have to leave.
This idea that people in small towns have small minds, that small towns hold you back, restrict you, has become one of our cultural certainties, hasn't it? And just recently, of course, there's been plenty of reason to believe that everything that's gone wrong with America can be traced back to the small town mindset, with its ingrained intolerance and its Trumpish politics. Well, but it's just not true. Yes, small town life can be tough and backward, and it certainly has its dark side. But if you look at the best evidence there is of human values, if you look at art, you'll see that the American small town has inspired marvelous things. And that's what this film is about, the marvelous artistic influence of small town America. Welcome to Mount Ayr in Iowa. Population 1,691. No, make that 1,692. It's a typical American small town in what they call the American Corn Belt, because corn is what everybody around here grows. In fact, did you know that last year they grew 2.5 billion bushels of corn in Iowa? I didn't know it either, till I got interested in the post office here in Mount Ayr. From the outside, it looks like thousands of other post offices you find in small town America. And do you know what? That's what it looks like on the inside too. Because look what they've got in here. It's by an artist called Orr C. Fisher. And it was painted in 1941 as part of a government initiative to fill the post offices of America with murals. Up and down the land, in pretty much every small town you go to, there's a mural in the post office. This one is called The Corn Parade. It's a charming piece of small town surrealism, featuring the biggest hunk of corn you've ever seen, being paraded with great ceremony through the streets of Mount Ayr. It's hilarious and rather brilliant. R.C. Fisher, the artist, is gently mocking the prominence of corn in Iowa. And of course, corn has two meanings. It isn't just this, it's also something that's overly sentimental or banal. Corn is king, proclaims Fisher's mural with a cheeky wisecrack. I, for one, wouldn't want to argue with a lump of corn that big. So altogether, there were 1,400 murals painted in American post offices in the 1930s and 40s, in 1,300 small American towns. It was a gigantic artistic achievement.
This land is your land, and this land is my land.
It was all part of a remarkable initiative by President Franklin D. Roosevelt to combat the terrible economic depression that hit America in the 1930s.
This land was made for you and me.
By commissioning murals for post offices, Roosevelt was finding work for America's artists, giving them support, a lifeline.
This land is my land.
And that's the strange thing about the Great Depression. Economically, it was disastrous. Artistically, it was a golden age. And not just in painting. This car, the Model A Ford, was another success of the Great Depression. Between 1928 and 1931, they built 5 million of these. And look how clean and spare its lines are. How it seems to have inherited some of the leanness of its times.
This land was made for you and me.
It's the same with these. Don't know about you, but I like a bit of salt on my corn. And fortunately, I can sprinkle it from this, the Charles Sheila salt shaker. And there's a pepper shaker that goes with it. A fabulous piece of sparse, sexy, minimalist design created out of aluminium in 1935, so slap in the middle of the Great Depression, but so astonishingly modern. Charles Sheila, the designer of the minimalist salt shaker, had small-town precision in his blood. He was mainly a painter, and only sometimes a designer. And to make ends meet, he became a photographer too. And in everything he did, he loved straight lines and unfussy effects. And that's why he also collected this stuff, Shaker furniture. The Shakers were a millenarian Christian sect who believed that the end of the world was nigh and that the modern world had grown too sinful. So they cut themselves off from it. They built their own houses, grew their own food, and made their own furniture. No decoration, no ostentation, no frills. You could buy it in IKEA today, couldn't you? It's so preternaturally modern and Scandinavian. The Shakers were ahead of their times in all sorts of ways. They believed in the equality of the sexes, that women were as good as men, and that God was both male and female. And there's a warm quality to everything they made, something very unmacho. I'm going to call it wholesomeness, because I can't think of another word for it. It's a respect for simplicity, an affection for things that are spare and humble. You get it in Shaker furniture, and you get it as well in the angelic interiors that Charles Sheeler painted. This one is called Home Sweet Home from 1931. It's strikingly modern with its clarity and its straight lines. And see his photographs of the same space, with that friendly stove, which he called his companion, throwing warmth and light into the room. What quiet poetry Sheeler discovers in things that are simple and unadorned. Those 5 million Model A Fords I was telling you about were all made up here at the River Rouge Ford plant in Dearborn, Michigan. Completed in 1927, it was at the time the largest factory complex in the world. We're not in the Corn Belt anymore. This is now the infamous Rust Belt, the broken post-industrial weeping ground of America that we've heard so much about on recent news broadcasts. Before it became the Rust Belt, this used to be called the industrial heartland of America. It was where the great dream of a mechanized American future was born, and where that dream was crushed when the rust set in. But back in 1927, all this was brand new. And Charles Sheeler, with his photography hat on, was sent here by an advertising company to photograph the mighty Ford manufacturing complex in River Rouge. This wasn't just the largest factory in the world, it was also the most progressive. 93 buildings and 100 miles of railway track. Everything you needed to turn raw materials into Model A Fords. Henry Ford called technology the new messiah. He believed in it on a religious scale. And Sheeler's photographs of River Rouge have a cathedral-like quality to them. Lofty, soaring, modernistically Gothic. But a few years later, he began painting the factory as well. And the paintings have a different mood. It's as if the coke furnaces and the steel plants, the power stations and the hammering yards have had a Shaker makeover that's left them looking angelic and white. In Sheeler's paintings of River Rouge, a thoughtful eye is noticing the harmonies and the balances in these giant factory sprawls. What you don't get is the thunder, the smoke, the effort, the destruction. All that has been pushed aside, nor is there any sign of any actual workers toiling in the labour yards. Sheeler's factories, purring with industrial contentment, seem to be running silently on Art Deco electric motors. It's a Shaker dream, and of course it wasn't what was really going on. For a true sense of the atmosphere of River Rouge, we need to switch artists and get in some immigrants. The Detroit Institute of Art. At its center, a mural masterpiece by Diego Rivera, the giant of Mexican muralism. These are called the Detroit Industry Murals. They were done in 1933, 27 scenes in all, painted by Rivera in 8 months of furious effort. So furious was the effort that Rivera, who was excellently fat, lost 100 pounds in weight in Detroit. Because painting ambitious frescoes is not a job for wusses. Remember, we saw a lot of Rivera and his frescoes in the first film in this series, the one about the Wild West. His speciality was big Mexican histories. But here in Detroit, he was commissioned to immortalize the giant Ford factory at River Rouge, and, by extension, to celebrate the pioneering spirit of industrial America. Money for the project was put up by Henry Ford's son, Edsel Ford, who'd taken over as president of the company in 1919, and who loved art. Rivera was invited to spend 3 months at the River Rouge factory, researching the technological dream. What he came up with is a melange of reality and mythology, a mix of time scales that lurches between the past and the present. Typical Rivera. Memories of ancient Mexico turn into fiery picturings of River Rouge and its workforce. Technology, the fresco seems to be saying, has always been with us. And it's always been a force for good, but also for bad. That scene up there with the baby, that's about the pharmaceutical industry discovering new vaccines to save young lives. But over here, the same pharmaceutical industry is creating a deadly nerve gas to be used in war. Same industry, different ambitions. The whole thing culminates in these 2 momentous evocations of River Rouge, one on each wall. This one here, the North mural, shows the engines being built, the famous Ford V8 flathead, the first engine to be cast from a single block of metal. The South mural, meanwhile, shows the actual car bodies being assembled, so it's altogether brighter and lighter. There's the chassis being put down. And up there, the new Ford Model 18s rolling off the assembly line. Now, these were very controversial when they were unveiled. Rivera was a notorious communist, and some of the religious symbolism he included, typical Mexican fashion, was denounced by the local Bible belters, who called for the murals to be destroyed. But Edsel Ford, to his credit, stuck to his guns, and with the clout of the Ford factory behind him, he made sure the murals were preserved. So they're still here, a fiery explosive, and complex tribute to the industry of America. So these kinds of murals, telling a big national story, were a Mexican import into America. But it wasn't just one-way traffic with Mexican artists crossing the border. It also went the other way. If you drive out of Mexico City and brave the scary roads, you get to a town called Morelia, where they've got this in the museum. This was painted in 1934 by a couple of traveling gringos from LA, one of whom we've already encountered, because it was Philip Goldstein, Jackson Pollock's buddy, who later became Philip Guston. You'll remember Guston from the first film, how he and Pollock were expelled from high school for attacking the school's sports department. Well, in 1934, Guston turned up in Mexico with his friend Ruben Cadiz. And in Morelia, they talked their way into painting this. It was originally called the struggle against terror and fascism, but these days it's usually known as the Inquisition. The figure in the center, the lumbering giant in the hood, represents the forces of repression and evil. They're trying to climb the ladder, but they're being beaten back by the forces of righteousness. Basically, it's a battle between good and bad, with the good guys up there and the forces of repression down here, torturing their victims, like this unfortunate fellow on this side who's being electrocuted, sent to his death in a death cap. Over here, a naked woman has been abused and strung up. She's the victim of the sinister hooded priest, who's also trying to climb the ladder. So the clambering bad guys are all dressed as the Ku Klux Klan. When this was painted in the 1930s, the Klan was at the peak of its power in small-town America. Lynching, terrorizing, rounding up. So when Guston and Cadiz cast the KKK as the forces of evil in their Mexican mural, they were hoping the folks back home were watching. The interesting thing about the Ku Klux Klan is that it's another Western fantasy.
With control of Washington on the line, Jon Ossoff embraces socialist Bernie Sanders.
If Ossoff wins, liberals will control Washington. That's why radicals from California are flocking to Georgia, because he'll put them in charge. This election comes down to them or us.
In fact, these notorious Klan outfits were also invented by Hollywood. The first appearance of the ghostly white hoods was in W.D. Griffith's notorious origin movie, The Birth of a Nation, the first film ever to be shown at the White House. Griffiths wanted to present the Klan as modern knights of the round table, so he got his costume department to invent some scary one-piece outfits that were based loosely on the costumes worn by flagellant societies in Europe at Easter time. The Griffiths look caught on and quickly became a must-have. And you could order the clan one piece on mail order. It only cost a couple of bucks. And that's how it became the clan uniform. And that, too, is how it came to haunt American memories of the 1930s. Look into the corners of all that small-town art created in small-town America, and you'll find plenty of disgust at the antics of the KKK. The angry Philip Guston never forgot or forgave the Klan. 3 decades later, he was still taking a pop at them, turning them into figures of scorn and ridicule in a wicked cartoon art that was deadly serious. This is a book everybody should read if they're interested in American art. How the Post Office Created America. It explains why all that art was put in all those post offices and why the post office was so important.
That old dust storm killed my baby, but it can't kill me.
Basically, America's post offices brought the nation together.
Killed my family.
Every town, no matter how small or pokey, had a post office.
Old landlord, and it got my
Hi there, have you got the Great Depression stamps that were brought out?
Yes, sir, we do.
Oh.
$5.
Thank you very much. It wasn't just the mail that was delivered here. This was also where the newspapers were sent. So all around the country, people could keep up with the latest news.
But it can't blow me down, and it can't blow me down.
The post office system was a kind of primitive internet that connected people and kept them informed.
That old dust.
And that's why all these murals were put in all these post offices.
Can't kill me.
This is by a Dallas artist called Jerry Bywaters, and it was painted for the post office here in Farmersville, Texas in 1941. And although at first sight it looks like a happy farming scene, what it actually is a public service announcement. This isn't any old farmer gathering the sheaves in any old field. This is an informed farmer, a rural progressive, who hasn't ploughed his field in destructive strips, but who's chosen the much healthier contour ploughing method. So it's all about the Dust Bowl, that terrible rural tragedy which hit America in the 1930s. By ploughing up the Great Plains in strips, the farmers here in Texas broke up all the topsoil. So when the winds came in, enormous clouds of dust would form in the sky. Black blizzards, they were called. Dust so dense, you couldn't see more than 5 feet ahead of you. So the best way to plough the fields wasn't in strips, which dried out all the topsoil, but in these clever contours, which held the water and didn't dry out so quickly. And that is what Bywaters is telling the people here in the post office in Farmersville. To be a happy farmer in Farmersville, Texas, this is how you should plough your fields. In jaunty and agriculturally progressive contours.
15th day of April of 19.
So does this scene look familiar to you? How about this? Have you ever been at a show where this happened? Oh man, if you
35, there struck the worst of dust storms that ever filled the sky. You could see that dust storm coming.
the Dust Bowl inspired a lot of art in small town America,
Through our minds,
or in this case, no town America.
from Oklahoma
This is Jerry Bywater's portrait of a Dust Bowl farmer, gnarled and nervy, down on his luck on his dried out land, while a plague of locusts chews up his scrawny crops.
we thought
What a
it was
powerful
our
image.
judgment. We thought it was our doom.
There was something biblical about the Dust Bowl, a sense that it was God's payback for man's folly. And there was one artist in particular, here in Texas, who kept pointing it out in picture after picture.
We saw a terrible sight.
Alexandra Hogue was his name. Alexandra spelt funnily, with the R and the E back to front.
Was now a ripping
Hogue specialised in Dust Bowl pictures and made art of a type no one had made before,
barbarian
parched and full of death.
factors in
It's remarkable art, but you never hear about Alexandra Hogue
and fire
because he was a small town artist,
we ran
and small town artists get ignored.
back again.
Hogue was from Memphis, Missouri, population 1,822. His father was a preacher, so there was religion in his blood. And although he looked like a geography teacher at a parents' meeting, or perhaps the chap who ran the local hardware store, he was actually a painter with angry passions, whose work was nervy and tense, filled with accusations. This one's called The Crucified Land. A homemade scarecrow has taken Jesus' place on the top of the hill. The landscape around is scarred, eroded. And who's to blame? That tractor on the horizon, ploughing up the land with mechanical ruthlessness. Hogue really had it in for tractors and ploughs because they were turning America into a desert. And his most famous picture shows the Texas landscape after the ploughs have been through it. The topsoil's gone, nothing's growing. And Mother Earth, personified spookily as a naked woman buried under the sands, has drawn her last breath and died, while the plough that killed her looms up in the foreground like the skeleton of a dead steer. So these small town artists brought something different to the party. Strange understandings, unfamiliar attitudes, hidden meanings. And that's particularly true of the most famous small town artist of them all, the one I'm going to need this for. Not many pictures get so famous that everybody knows them. In fact, you can probably count them on one pitchfork. The Mona Lisa, the Scream, and the one that's set here, American Gothic by Grant Wood. It's the most famous American painting. It's been on stamps and biscuit tins, political posters, and your dad's socks. But no one is entirely sure what it's trying to say. That's the thing with small-town artists. They're sneaky, secretive, keep it all to themselves. So, is American Gothic a bit of a send-up? A cheeky prod at the dour and stubborn citizens of Iowa? Or is it a patriotic tribute to the unbending spirit of rural America? This is the house in the picture, with that pointy Gothic window that sets the tone. The woman is his sister, Nan Wood, and he's made her face longer and thinner, unhappy, stern.
Now that is a flashlight, and this flashlight does not even need batteries. Actually, this is
The man is his real-life dentist, a fellow called Dr. Byron McKeeby. Apparently, Wood had a really sweet tooth and even put sugar on the lettuce in his salads. So he saw a lot of his dentist and would have spent many a foggy, anaesthetised moment staring up at the disapproving face of Byron McKeeby. I'm pretty sure it's a send-up. All of Grant Wood's art seems to have more going on in it than you think. It was complex, and his art was full of coded observation and hidden meanings. This road picture, for instance, looks at first like a jaunty motoring poster from the 1930s. But look closer and you'll see there's a bend coming up. And hurtling round it is a big red lorry. There's going to be a crash. The telegraph poles that line the road have turned into crosses of death. While everyone else in the 30s was celebrating the joys of motoring, Grant Wood was outing the car as a weapon of death. And, as we all know now, he was right. For most of his life, Wood lived here, in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. He put the town on the map, so they're keen to celebrate him here, Iowa style. His studio was up here. Originally, this was a mortuary, and up there was where the hearses were kept for transporting the dead bodies. And up in the attic, that's where American Gothic was painted. Wood's friend, the local undertaker, David Turner, let him use the loft above the hearses to live in and work. His sister Nan moved in as well, and so did his mother. He painted her in this studio and made something sacred of her presence. So there were 3 of them squeezed into this tiny attic, and Wood, who was a man of many talents, built clever bits of furniture for them, which folded away and saved space. The front door, meanwhile, was converted from a reused coffin lid. And he put a charming glass dial on the front, telling people where he was. He was handy. He could make things, rustle them up with small-town ingenuity. It's not like art students today who go straight to college and read books about deconstruction. Wood trusted his hands and relied on them. He made jewelry, furniture, and wacky household decorations, bashed together from stuff he found in the alleyway outside his studio. The other thing he began doing was making prints. They're brilliant, some of his best work. This one here shows the ancient Arabic order of the nobles of the mystic shrine, or shriners as they're usually called. Faces trembling, the Shriners of Cedar Rapids have gathered under the Egyptian pyramids to belt out their Masonic hymn. His greatest print shows something you don't often find in regionalist art, a male nude, tipping a bucket of water over his head in an empty field in Iowa. According to his sister, when Wood was a kid, he loved taking his clothes off during a thunderstorm and feeling the rain gliding down his naked body. And that's what this print is about. Sultry Night, it's called. A strange and ecstatic memory from an artist who saw things differently. I've been thinking about that sleek black car that's about to crash into the red lorry in Grant Wood's car picture. I wonder if it was one of these. In the last film, the one about the big city, I showed you the paintings of Rudolf Bauer, the abstract artist from Germany who wowed them in New York. Well, Bauer had another life. He was crazy about cars. These days, you don't hear much about Rudolf Bauer. As an artist, he's largely forgotten. But back in the 1930s, he was thought to be hugely important, and his artistic reputation was sky high. Everyone wanted a Bauer. He sold so many pictures to the Guggenheim Museum that he had Guggenheim cash coming out of his ears. So he bought himself a place in the country and spent his money on cars. Bauer the artist may be forgotten, but Bauer the car nut is definitely not. And this car here, the Duesenberg SJ Town Car Cabriolet, built between 1937 and 1940, the last Duesenberg ever made. This car is considered to be the Mona Lisa of cars in America. All Duesenbergs are impressive, but this one here, which Bauer commissioned and designed, is, as they say, a doozy. 20 feet long, 320 horsepower. It's a vehicular masterpiece from the golden age of country driving. Everything about it emphasizes its speed and its power. Look how long and low it is, with this bonnet that goes on and on and on. And see, there's no running boards to disturb these clean lines. An artistic mind is expressing itself extravagantly in a car body. Michelangelo did it with marble. Bauer did it with his Duesenberg. So the outside is stunning, but for me, the real joy of this car, the knockout artistic touch, is the interior. Look at the colour of that. It's mauve. Yes, mauve. But a mauve of thrilling directness, selected specially to surprise and delight whoever sits down on it. It's a brilliant artistic touch. So no, Rudolf Bauer doesn't have much of a reputation anymore in the art world. But in the world of cars, he's king of the road. Cars weren't the only form of mechanical transport which honked the horn of the small-town American artist. They also had a thing about trains. Thomas Hart Benton, Jackson Pollock's teacher, was a train enthusiast. He kept putting them in his murals. The iron horse at full gallop, snorting and roaring its way through the story of America. Benton produced this strange lithograph as well, of a train and a horse having a race. For the time being, the horse is winning. But for how long? Trains were part of America's origin myth. It wasn't just the post office that brought the nation together. It was trains as well, crisscrossing the land from the Atlantic to the Pacific, joining up America's dots. There was something haunting about trains. Turning up on the small town doorstep, seemingly from nowhere. Long before the American imagination came up with the extraterrestrial, it already had a stranger at the door.
With control of Washington on the line, John Ossoff embraces socialist Bernie Sanders.
If Ossoff wins, liberals will control Washington. That's why radicals from California are flocking to Georgia, because he'll put them in charge. This election comes down to them or us.
My father worked on the railways, and I remember lying awake at night, listening to the trains going by. Where were they going? What were they doing? There's this mysterious poetry to trains, and something Freudian about their presence. One American artist in particular fell deeply in love with this nocturnal strangeness. He's the short one with the glasses. Oh, Winston Link was his name. The greatest American photographer of the train. Link started out as a commercial photographer. He had a degree in civil engineering and specialized in clever technological photography. And one day, on a job in Staunton, Virginia, he found out that the last steam trains in America were about to be phased out and replaced by diesel. So he appointed himself the guardian of the steam train.
Sorry about that.
What he did was set up these huge arrangements of flashlights, 50 bulbs at a time, all set up to go off at once. "I can't move the sun," he explained. "It's always in the wrong place. And I can't move the tracks. But at night, I can control the lighting and create my own environment." So all the flashes would explode at once, and that was it. He had one go at each picture, one shot in the dark to capture the last moments of the American steam age. This photo here, by the way, is something he gave me to thank me for writing about his work. That's how modest he was. But it's America that should be thanking O. Winston Link for recording the final act of its origin myth, and for doing it so brilliantly. This American appetite for trains and cars, for junkyard textures and industrial forms, was new in art. For the artists of small-town America, machines were an opportunity, not an enemy. You know, I can't imagine Salvador Dali being able to fix a puncture. That's something he would have left to his chauffeur. But American artists could. American artists had sump oil in their veins. They could drive a tractor or tune an engine. Machines and technology were part of their lives, and it led to an art that was pioneering and different. This is by Edward Hopper. A garage scene set at twilight of a lonely bloke at a pump. Ha! No one had made art about that before. And small-town art could also be fiercely progressive. This was made in 1951 by David Smith, the greatest American sculptor of the 20th or any other century. It's called Hudson River Landscape, and it depicts a landscape glimpsed from the window of a passing train, remembered in welded steel. Imagine that, a landscape made of steel. Smith was from Decatur, Indiana, population 9,407. When he was 15, his family moved to Paulding, Ohio, population 3,605. But it was here that he ended up, in Bolton Landing, in upstate New York, population 513. As a student, He'd worked at the Studebaker factory in Indiana, assembling cars. Smith could weld and rivet before he could draw. And during the Second World War, he welded together trains and tanks for the American Locomotive Company. And it was in New York, at the Art Students League, that he discovered modern.
So what do you do when your computer crashes and all those memories you've been storing for years are wiped out? This is
art. His early work is basically an extended homage to Picasso. Smith was the pupil, Picasso was the teacher. But then he graduated. He picked up his oxyacetylene torch with a vengeance and became truer to himself, truer to his American past. No one in art had ever welded as freely as David Smith could weld. No one had ever had the raw materials rusting in the backyard that were rusting at Bolton Landing. This is called Song of an Irish Blacksmith. It's a tribute to a fellow welder from the Locomotive Company. So it's a ballad made of steel. And I think that's the seat of an old tractor. And that's been cut out of a boiler. Smith would collect all this stuff, bits of old ploughs, old tools, unwanted tractor parts left over from the Dust Bowl, and he'd weld and bend and cut them into something new. Where others saw uselessness, he saw beauty. What others threw away, he collected and transformed with marvelous small-town ingenuity. So here's this big American bloke, 6'3", built like two truck drivers squeezed into the same pair of trousers, but making art of exceptional delicacy out of things he'd found by the side of the road. This one's called The Letter. What a crazy idea. To make a letter, a piece of paper with words on it, out of chunks of welded steel. Sculpture was one thing before David Smith came along, and another thing after him. When he first came here to Bolton Landing, he was married. Later, he had children here with his second wife. But by the end, he was on his own. And he'd put his sculptures out there in the field outside his studio. And he'd sit here watching them, growing out of the small town earth, like corn growing in a field in Iowa. Here's this fierce modernist, one of the greatest sculptors of the 20th century, living on his own and creating metal friends for himself to keep him company, like a small town father cheering up a small town child. This one is called Star Cage. It's the sky at night, the cosmos, evoked in modern metals. What a thing to do, to weld yourself a new galaxy out of brushed industrial steel. It took me 4 days to hitchhike from Saginaw. Small town America, the land of junkyards and post offices, trailer parks, and garage pumps gave its artists new textures and an independent way of thinking. It made them handy, good at building things, and it made them cussed, maybe even a bit unbalanced. As for David Smith, he died tragically in 1965 in a car crash. He was 59. Counting the cars on the New Jersey Turnpike.
So what'd you guys think of that?
Very good. Charles, what is that gentleman's name again?
I'll look it up for you because, hang on. Let's see. See if it gives us the name.
David Smith.
What was that, Claudia?
Last guy was David Smith.
No, not the artist, the narrator.
But the guy, who narrates these. I'll try to get his name.
Talking about the narrator, is that what she wants to know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, he's not the only one, but he's one of the people who does this series in what they call Perspective. And if you're looking for him on YouTube, any of the Perspective videos, like I said, he's one of about 3 different narrators that I've seen, in their series. But I like him in particular because, he brings up, some really interesting things about how he ties everything together and how it's kind of related, which, I really admire in his work because, it gives you a broader perspective of what was going on and a deeper understanding. It's not just, if you looked at like Grant Wood's work or, Thomas Hart Benton or any of those people, and you didn't have the context for why they were doing what they were doing and the time in which they were doing it, you wouldn't have the same appreciation for the work.
Yes, this is true.
Yeah. So.
I've seen him before. He's very good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've shown a couple of different videos where he's the narrator, and I like him a lot. I
like his style. He's very humorous. He's entertaining.
He is.
He's very British.
He is. Yeah. Very much so. Anyway, so that kind of gave you a little different perspective. And, one of the things I wanted to point out, is because we were talking about abstraction last week, right? Yeah. And so a lot of this was taking shape and taking form in this country at the same time that a lot of the European artists were coming, from Europe, to America, such as the German artist Bauer that he mentioned, and how they were sort of, taking over and saturating the academic institutions, and that really changed the direction of art in this country. But even at that, if you look at Grant Wood's or Thomas Hart Benton's, murals and paintings and things, they're not, they're not these typical, compositions anymore. And all of a sudden, they're these very complex designs, that have a lot of layers and they get very almost abstract, in the sense of how they're designed and laid out. And so, there's definitely an influence, on what they were seeing and how they were reacting to it. And, and then you go into that period where, American art really got into, being pretty much so, modernist abstraction, and really kind of American abstraction was sort of the premier art really of the world, for almost 40 years. And anyhow, anybody got any comments or questions about that?
I particularly like the findings that he found other people's trash and made into real nice abstract sculptural pieces.
Yeah, Woods. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Very nice.
I mean, he was like a lot of these people. They were, pretty well-rounded, multidisciplinarian type people, and they didn't do just one thing. So again, like a lot of artists, there's more than just one side of them, and throughout art history, I would say that's one of, I think, the disservices, when you look at artists in an academic way. They present one side of them, and they don't really give you this full picture of them as a person. And I think that's one of the nice things about this series is, we looked at a film that he did on Van Eyck, right? And how, not only Van Eyck's work, but Van Eyck's, and his place in the society, in Dutch society at the time, and how he was connected to the community and things like that. And it gave you a whole totally different perspective on, why he was doing what he was doing at the time. And so, and there's lots of films that he does like that. Anyway.
I like the perspective on how the U.S. Post Office played an important role in our lives. I wish that they would have more art on the walls now while you're standing in line so long.
Yeah.
The post office aren't very beautiful anymore.
Yes, true.
They have really cut back on them for various reasons, and so I won't go into that. But I loved going into to a post office that would have art, that you would have something to look at, think about, and enjoy your time there.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you go into like a lot of the older central post offices, and a lot of those are gone, like in the larger urban areas. But yeah, you almost have to go to these small towns, where that post office building, it was really the center of town. Everything grew up kind of around it, and it really was a lifeline, to get the news, communicate, send, receive packages, letters, things like that. And it doesn't have that same weight that it used to have in American life, because now, how often do we go to the post office?
Once
Because
a
of
year.
the pandemic, probably never.
Yeah, well, some people almost never, the rest of us, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, not
I
that.
go more than that, but since
Yeah.
the pandemic, I don't. But I used to go all the time.
Uh-huh.
All the time. It's just the modern post office are just there for one function and not for you to enjoy anything. And I think that modern is nice. It has its place, but I think that history has its place, and it can really enrich your life to see and know things that was before you, and to see how art was developed, and it told a story about that town or some other little town. And makes you think of your grandparents or great-grandparents, the world that they lived in. So it just has a better message to me than the modern post office.
Yeah. Well, as far as I know, those, 1,400 and some odd murals that were painted during the WPA, just about all of those have survived. Just about all of them. Now sometimes the building itself has been torn down, but they preserve those murals. And some of those murals are actually in like the Smithsonian, and I think like the Chicago Art Institute has a couple of Benton murals that he had done that had been in like post offices in and around the Chicago area, and then they were dismantled and reassembled, you know, at the institute. So, but yeah, it was, you know, I mean, if you think back, you know, and relate it to the situation that we're in now, because, you know, we're in an economic, you know, depression, basically. You know, we have a lot of people who are out of work. We have families right now who are, you know, I mean, we're talking about, you know, hundreds of thousands of people who are showing up, you know, at bread lines and in, you know, food banks and things like that to get food because they don't have a job right now. So it's a very relevant time, you know, when you start, you know, looking back at, you know, like the 1930s and the Depression, and look at how, you know, and what the response was at the time. You know, at the time, you know, the government responded by putting together the WPA, which was a works program, and not, you know, not just for artists, but artists, writers, you know, all kinds of creative people, but also, you know, if you really think about it, those highways that we have that stretch from, you know, the East Coast to the West Coast.
Under Eisenhower.
Yeah, well, it was actually Roosevelt who, you know, actually got that rolling. Yeah. You know, Eisenhower ended up, you know, at the end of it, you know, seeing the completion of a lot of that. But, you know, if the WPA had not been created, you know, literally, you know, millions of people would have been out of work, you know, in this country, and had no viable way of, you know, making a living. And then you add on top of the actual depression, at the same time, just, you know, this country's good fortune, I guess we would say, you know, you had the Dust Bowls and things in the West. And, you know, you had literally hundreds of thousands of American families who were reliant on, you know, what they could grow, you know, in their land, you know, as a way of sustaining themselves and their families. And, you know, because of the change in climate, you know, and the erosion of the soil, things like that, a lot of those people had to leave, you know, their land. You know, pardon? Yeah, that they had literally in their family for a couple of generations at that point. You know, and where did they end up? You know, a lot of them migrated to the cities, the larger cities, because it was, you know, about the only possible place that they could go to find a viable way of making a living. And so, you know, it literally, that time, changed the landscape in this country. You know, and we didn't really get over, you know, a lot of the effects of that really until the 1950s or 1960s. You know.
Well, we did that today, they would call it socialist.
Well,
you put people to work today. If the government puts people to work today,
yeah,
who earned a living and paid their money to buy groceries and buy homes and stuff like that, they would still call it socialist, even though they're going to put the money back into society.
That's really because people don't really know what socialism is. Socialism is in everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, they know that,
right.
But they don't want you to think that.
Yeah.
Want you to
Well,
think
actually, I'm trying to think of who gave this quote, but it's, you know, if you really begin to think about it, it's quite true. actually, I think it was Martin Luther King who said this, that you have socialism for the rich, and you have rugged individualism for the poor. Yeah. And you know, I mean, there's a truth to that. And if you look at, you know, the whole progression over the last 40 years of what we call neoliberalism, you know, it's brought us kind of to the state that we are now, where you have this impasse of, you know, this back and forth between, you know, conservatism and what they call neoliberalism. You know, but, you know, in essence, you know, there's a lot that those two camps of thought agree on. And what they agree on is that they prop up, you know, the banking systems, you know, industry, if any industry is really left in this country, but, you know, mainly corporations and things. And then when it comes to social services, you know, that's when there's no money, you know, according to them, you know. Now, you know, we could get off into deep philosophical thoughts about that, but this is probably not the time or place to do that, you know. But as it relates to, you know, history and art, you know, I think, you know, one of the reasons I wanted to show this particular film was that I think it gave everybody a lot of insight into that particular period of time, you know, in and around the Depression and just the post-Depression, and how we got to, you know, contemporary modern art, as it were. So anyway.
I have a question, Charles.
Yeah.
More, not a question so much as a statement, or I don't know what.
We'll pick whatever you got.
So in watching this film, which I really enjoyed, made me think of two pieces that Bernice did.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked the question when you showed it. She sent in a piece where she did she copied a Tim Burton piece.
Mm-hmm.
And then you
the what
the
is
skeleton with the white, one face was white that you.
Oh yeah.
Okay, that.
Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yeah,
Nightmare Before Christmas. Thank you, John. And so you showed that piece, and then you showed a piece that she did without copying it from someone.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so amazed that both of them were very nice, but they were so different. To me, it appeared it was done by two different artists, but it was all done by Bernice.
Okay.
And so in my head, I can't see how, and it's a gift that to me it's gifted. How she can do two different styles from one person. And so that made me think, because like you were saying, these artists that they showed, they had more than one style, more than one side of them. And so that's what I saw and made me think about Bernice, how she has more than one side of her art. And to me, that's amazing that can come out of the same person. It was, they look completely different. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Well, okay. I'll throw that back.
I probably have split personality or something. I don't know.
No, not a split personality, Bernice.
Yeah. Well, okay. So, lady, okay,
Yes.
I'll throw that back at you because, you know, I'm sitting here looking at you, okay,
Yeah.
and behind you, you have three pieces of art, you know, as I'm seeing you to your left, that seem to be kind of consistent, you know, and one thing. And then you have those masked, which are another.
Yeah, and they're two different artists. The ones on this side were done by my father, the one on that side done by me. So it's artwork done by two different artists. So you're absolutely right.
Okay, but I thought you had
mean your father
those others as well.
Through you, right? You mean your father that came through you? Because it actually came from your paintbrush, right?
No. Say that again, Bernice.
You saying your father that came through you is how the pictures were done, or are you saying they were actually done by your father?
Actually done by my father.
Oh,
The work
okay.
this side is done by my father. The
Okay.
work
Oh,
on this
okay.
side is done by me.
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying you was channeling your father. Yeah.
Okay.
No.
But lady, I've also seen pieces of your work that, you know, were pretty similar to what your father had done, and then other pieces that you've created, and it seems like every time that you do a piece, you know, there's something really different about it, you know.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
I always thought the things that I did was similar. They are all in the same general wheelhouse. It's similar. I don't see where my things are that different.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, you know, I do.
the thing that you did, what they said you should have won first place. That to me was totally out of something that you normally do. Because normally what you were doing was taking like the paint and just dabbing it on and see what you could make from that. You know how you dab it on or finger paint it on. But on that one, you took a scene and that he had given you and made your own scene from it. Now, that's what he said it looked like an Asian thing to him.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
The one with the bird, with the egret. Yeah.
Yes.
But again, you know, it depending on what the source is, you know, you as an artist, you know, you take different things from it, and you know, you can come up with, you know, a really wide range of different ways of treating things. And I see that.
I think we've seen a lot of that here.
Pardon?
I think we've seen a lot of that here with our group.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Not just Bernice, but Eloise, Naomi, Ilan. Different things that look different based on what we're trying to achieve or develop or expand ourselves.
Well, one thing I feel is that since we are not artists that started when we were 2 and 3 or even 5, we're still trying to find ourselves. So we're doing over here, we're doing that over there. We say, okay, you know, we don't know who we are yet in terms of art.
This is so true, Bernice. That's so true.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I'll use John as the example. Now, Charles, you said this when people have developed a style like Naomi style. When you see a piece of art, you know it's Naomi. You know, she doesn't have to put her Naomi signature on it. When you see it, you know it's Naomi. Same way with John. Consistent, beautiful. It's you know it's their artwork. You know, and with the piece that Bernice did, again, they both were really nice pieces. But to me, I guess the way I see it, it was so different. It was just, I don't know, it wasn't just so much the subject matter, it was just the way in which she approached it and drew it and painted. It was just different, completely different. And so that's why I'm saying with the film we just saw, how you said how the styles of some of the artists, they had more than one style. And it's beautiful. It was just, her work was nice, and that film was really nice too.
Well, and Bernice and you kind of made a statement. Well, I guess Bernice made the statement, you know, that, well, we're not really artists. And yeah, that's something that I think, you know, all of you need to get over, because the fact is, I guess one of the things I'm trying to teach you, we're all artists.
If I said it that way, that's not what I meant. I meant we are newer than people, and we're still trying to find us. I didn't mean to say we're not artists. I meant to say that we are artists that are struggling to find the real artist that I want to put out there. We're just dabbling in everything until you say, oh yeah, that's really what I'm going to put out there. That really conveys me. And we have, me especially, I haven't found that piece of art yet that says to me what I want it to say.
Yeah. So Bernice, I guess what I can say to you is that, you know, 20 or 30 years from now,
Okay, thank you.
or a little bit further down the line, however far down the line we go. And this is true with professional artists too. They're always struggling. They're always, trying to come up, with new ways of saying things, really trying to find themselves and what they want to say and how they want to say it.
We just talked about that with Picasso.
Right.
The big differences.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how long you do this. You're always going to be, trying to push that edge, and either push your technical ability and your ability to, let's say that you're a painter, to lay down paint in a certain way and to control it and to become adept at handling that media. Or if you're a sculptor, different materials and how to work with those, but it's always that struggle of, at first you struggle with kind of the technical part of it, which is, how do I use these materials? And as you develop, you begin to find a little more about your voice and what you want to talk about and how you want to go about saying that. So, that's kind of the cycle of growth, that artists go through. And, again, I'll argue, everybody, even if they tell you, well, I don't have any artistic talent whatsoever. I have an issue with that with people because the fact is everybody is an artist. As a child, show me a child who doesn't draw. Show me a child who doesn't create and make things. That's part of the human spirit. That's part of being a human being. And so in essence, we're all artists. Now, whether we pursue that as a career, is a totally different, conversation. A lot of people decide, early on, that's not what they're going to pursue as a career. Other people, don't seem to make that choice and keep going with that, throughout their whole life. So anyway, anybody got anything else? No? Okay.
Do we begin submitting our before and after pictures today or when?
I'm sorry?
You gave us an assignment to look at things done years ago. So do we start submitting that today?
Yes, you can. Yes, please. Yeah. Yeah, and I'll gather some of that up over lunchtime if you send it to me. And then, of course, we'll look at that and talk about it, this afternoon, as well as on Wednesday and Friday. Okay. I have to let you know, okay, before we go away, though, Fulton County, they've done it to us again, okay? My classes, I had them scheduled really up until, I think, about the 21st or so. And I think that was like the last class that we were going to have before the holiday. And then we were going to start back right after the beginning of the year. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, we have a runoff election going here. And I've been told as of Friday afternoon at about 4 o'clock that they're going to end all the Zoom classes on the 18th. Will be the last Zoom class. And they probably won't go back online until about the 18th or so of January, because they're taking everybody in our department and basically, temporarily assigning us to the Department of Elections for the early voting and then for the count later on, to get through this election process again. And so yours truly, as of the 21st, I have no idea where I'm going to end up I have no idea exactly what I'm going to end up doing, but you know, they're going to give all of us assignments. And from what I understand, we're going to be working 7 days a week through that period of time. So, you know,
That's good. And, you know, I wish they would videotape the whole thing, and then we would know that it was all, everything was legit.
yeah.
I know it is, but that was so everybody could see it, see you working even.
Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, the fact is, you know, a lot of those locations, like the World Congress Center, you know, all of that was videotaped, and you know, and still, you know, people, you know, they still come up with things, you know, to question, you know, the legitimacy of what was being done. So, you know, you're not going to keep everybody happy. What can I say? But unfortunately,
Charles,
yes.
this is Claudia. What is the purpose for us submitting old artwork?
What is the purpose of what?
Us submitting old artwork, something about old work.
Okay. That's a bit of an oversimplification. The idea was not to submit old artwork. The idea was for you to go back, look at some of the work that you had done in the past. Okay. You know, pick a piece that you were happy with at the time, you know, that you thought made, you know, you had made, you know, kind of a milestone, or, you know, something that really stands out that you really like. And then I want you to look at it, you know, from the perspective of where you are now as an artist, right? And it's like, okay, that's what I did then, knowing what I knew at the time. Now I'm further down the line, you know, and, you know, I have more tools available to me. I've seen more things. What would I do differently? Okay, how would I change this? You know, how do I think I could, you know, maybe make it better, you know, to maybe say, you know, what it is that you wanted to say with that piece in the first place. Okay. And it doesn't have to be that you have to go back and redo the piece, or that you're changing the piece, or any of that. It's more of just becoming self-aware of, this is where I was at that time. Now I see it in a different way. Okay. And how you see it differently. Okay.
And I want you to be satisfied with what you have to do, because on your job description, everything falls under other related duties.
Right. Yes. Yeah, that's the caveat that the, you know, county always, you know, not only the county, you know, any job, you know, they're going to get you to do what they want you to do, and that's okay. You know, there's nothing really wrong with that. You know, I mean, you know, this election process is, you know, vitally important.
Keep you rounded.
Yeah, but at this particular time, I mean, you know, this really matters. This is going to make a difference. This is going to make a difference in, you know, what goes on in the next 4 or 5 years.
It'll have an effect on the entire world indirectly.
I'm moving anyway.
Yes, it will. Yeah.
Indirectly,
I'm moving anyway, so.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, you know.
It's going to affect the world indirectly, so you can't move out of the world.
Oh, you're right. I forgot about that.
Charles,
yes.
Do you foresee Fulton County maybe discontinuing this platform after January?
No,
Think we'll still be on. We'll still have a class on Zoom.
Yes. Yeah. No. And we talked about this a little bit on Friday.
Yeah.
I don't see Fulton County ever moving away from this.
Okay.
I mean, as a platform, because we've learned so much, you know, and it opens up possibilities that never existed before. You know, even if we did open up the centers and go back so that some people could be in that physical classroom space, I think that there will always be a component where that's also being, you know, open to people in remote locations who can't get there. you know.
Plus the fact you're getting people now as you go older, you're not as mobile as before, and you possibly can't get there now. But this is a good way. You're in your own home, and you can actually
participate.
That's right. Actually participate.
And you know, I mean, even pandemic or no pandemic, you know, there are people, you know, who are in a, you know, physical state, you know, that, or that they have transportation challenges or things like that. And, you know, without this as a conduit, you know, to connect with them, they wouldn't be able to attend a class. And so, again, I think the county has learned a lot, you know, in the process of doing this. And I think that this is one of those, you know, tools that they're going to try to expand and develop and incorporate into, you know, other venues and other ways of using it. So no, I don't see it going away. And besides, what are they going to do with me up until June? You know, I think they've run out of elections that they can have.
We'll find something else.
You know, unless we go down, you know, another 2 years. You know, in two more years, you have a midterm election, and you know, if I were still around, I'm sure that they could, you know, suck me into that. But you know, by then I won't be here. Okay.
Always put it on your resume. Your electoral experience.
Right. Yeah, I have electoral experience now. Yeah.
You can go down to small towns and tell them how to run their election.
How to count votes. Yeah.
How to count votes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, my role in the last election, you know, my position was what they call an auditor. Okay. And auditor, I think, was a fancy name for somebody who, you know, sat down there and opened up boxes with another person and counted these votes. And we checked, you know, against each other, you know, and we both had to be in agreement, you know, that there were so many votes, you know, for X and so many votes for Y and, you know, whoever else, and report that, you know, and then sign our names that we did, in fact, actually count those votes and that we were in agreement that this is what we got in that box. And, you know, and then there were people, you know, further up the line who, you know, did the rest of it. But, you know, whether I'll be doing that or, you know, whether I'll just be doing, you know, meeting and meeting, you know, at the door as people come in for early voting, who knows? So, you know, and I guess in response to Claudia, you know, if I put that on my resume, you know, that would just kind of qualify me as, you know, the old guy greeting you at the door in Walmart, I guess.
Well, based on what I've seen out here, it might qualify you to run for office.
Well, you know.
You'd be better at it than some of the people that are running.
Well, yeah, let's not even go down that road.
That's right. Leave it alone. Stop while you're ahead.
Yeah. Probably the last thing, you know, that anybody here wants to see is me running for any political office. You know, so
because that'll just take you away from what we enjoy doing with you the most.
Yeah. Yeah. Other than I would be an avid supporter of the arts, you know, which I think we could use, you know. So
Absolutely.
Anyhow, we will be back here at 2:00. And like I said, go ahead and send, you know, if you've got something, go ahead and send it. And, you know, we'll take a look at all of that. And obviously, you know, you'll each have a chance to talk about, you know, what you sent and why you sent it and what the differences are, you know, between now and then. Okay.
Yeah. Question is, I hope you got it.
Well, okay. I'll look and see. All right.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.